Colorado became a state 150 years ago, but we almost didn't. It took 5 tries and more than 15 years to achieve statehood.
That's when you know you really want it.
Yeah.
5 tries. Joining us now is History Colorado's Catherine Mercer, who is joining us to talk about the path to statehood and why it was so challenging. So 5 times. Kim says she was listening to a podcast on this.
Yeah, you were talking about that. So. And 5 different times, and it was because there was some opposition.
Yeah, so there's different groups and communities across Colorado that oppose statehood for various reasons, and the federal government has to agree that we should be a state, and they don't always agree. So we have all these different layers, and everything has to come together to create statehood.
So each time, was it a different thing?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different reason each time. So, you know, miners a couple times don't want to pay taxes. They don't support the seat of government in Denver. In 1865, we have 137 black men who actually put a petition to Congress for Colorado not to become a state, because if we do, we've written into the Constitution that black men will not have the right to vote in the new state. So there's all these layered issues in each attempt.
You're the historian behind the History Colorado Center New Statehood exhibit. Why is it called 38th Star?
It's called the 38th Star because we are the 38th state in the nation. So we're the 38th star on the flag. And another special thing is that we're also the nation's only centennial state, because we became a state exactly 100 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
So maybe that was why the 5 tries. No, not really. One of the things you mentioned was the argument over the Capitol, because some wanted Golden, right?
Yeah, so that is another part of this conflict, is the miners want a seat of power in Golden. They want the railroad to go there, but then other people say Denver. And so there's all these political skirmishes between the mining towns and Denver, and voting and not voting for the people in power in Denver. And that's one of the reasons statehood fails multiple times.
Is there anything, I mean, you're a historian, so I would guess you know most everything that happened, but is there anything that surprised you about the lead up to Colorado becoming a state? I mean, we know about the 5 tries and why, but has anything caught you by surprise?
I think it's the importance of people in the story, of the different communities across Denver. You know, people living in southern Colorado also don't support statehood because the government in Denver is refusing to translate laws into Spanish for them. And we know who these people are, we know their names, we know how many people are involved, and it's just the idea of, you know, all the way back in the 1800s, people getting involved in their local communities and making a difference had a huge impact.
I think that's what's so interesting, is that they were thinking, like you mentioned, the black men, and also with women fighting for the right to vote.
Exactly.
That was very complicated here. So part of our past is not pretty, that's for sure.
It's very complex.
It's really awful, and it's complex in some ways.
Yes, it's very complex for sure.
And I would think that almost every state in the nation has its own specific story, specific to the region, the problems, the industry. I mean, we're talking about mining and we're talking about the railroad. I would think, you know, race was probably common to many of them, but it's kind of neat that when you're talking about where they wanted the capital, you're talking about Golden, closer to, you know, Idaho Springs, where there were, you know, where there was all the mining happening, first electricity.
Exactly.
It's really kind of neat.
Yeah, it's really neat how regional our story is. Of course, we're part of the context of the West where these kinds of questions are happening, but here we have all these such specific communities and people living in these areas.
Wow. Well, hopefully we'll think of all that on Saturday, right?
Yes, on Saturday, Colorado Day.
Yeah, and 150 years really isn't that old.
In the grand scheme of things, no.
Not really.
No.
Oh,
Happy birthday, Colorado.
Yes, that was
Thank
so
you very
helpful.
much.
Yes, thank you both.